This is Tell Me Something Good About Retail with Bob Phibbs, the Retail Doctor. The champion for a more human connection in retail for over 30 years as the Retail Doctor. Bob is the authority on brick-and-mortar retail across the world, who works with some of the biggest luxury brands to independent retailers of all sizes.
Managing music product inventory isn't just buying and selling and stocking what you can sell, it's also managing what you can't sell. Ever wonder how some retailers seem to master the art of keeping inventory fresh and quickly turning it into cash and profits? Then you're in for a treat with this episode, because today I'm talking to a duo. First, with Alan Friedman, CPA and co-founder. Alan has over 40 years of accounting, tax, and consulting experience in the music industry, as well as an instructor with Yamaha and Harley Davidson. He plays by ear, and in his spare time, Alan can be found recording in his basement studio or playing guitar in the all-CPA band, the Accounting Crows. But Next, I'm joined by Daniel Jobe, Managing Director with the accounting firm of Friedman, Kannenberg and Company. Daniel and his firm have extensive experience in providing accounting, tax, business evaluation, and other consulting services to the music industry. And he is a classically trained trombonist who refuses to join Alan's bands. In his spare time, he enjoys hitting golf balls and spending time with his family, visiting all 30 MLB baseball parks. Welcome.
Hey, thanks.
Hi there, Bob.
Thanks for joining me today. You know, Daniel, when I was pursuing my conducting degree, my secondary instrument was trombone in college. So awesome. I love the idea. It's a B flat. No, it's an F. I love it. It's all in my head. Yay.
I always tell Alan I have more friends than he does, because even though he's a guitarist, it's like the classically trained musicians are the ones that own businesses. So, pretty much, I don't know. Alan, you like to play with that.
I like to believe that. And, that always brings that connection. It's funny to be talking to two CPAs that are musicians. I think of Sondheim, who was an avid puzzle guy, and he loved figuring things out. So, Alan, what's the connection between playing music and spreadsheets?
Well, first, I want to go on the record by saying that most guitarists, well, you guys love B flat. We hate B flat and E flat too, for that matter. So, and we also hate A sharp. It's about the extent of my musical jokes.
Okay.
What was the question?
The question is, what's the connection between playing music and spreadsheets? Most musicians are not detailed guys that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So a little background. When it's kind of, I grew up in Albany, New York, and I've been playing guitar since, I remember when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. I'm 67, so I was 7 years old when they showed up, and we all saw that and said, wow, that's what we want to do. We want to play guitar so we can get the girls screaming for us. And so I started playing guitar. But at the same time, when I was in high school, my father was a CPA, and I wound up taking a bookkeeping class. And I actually really liked it. I really hadn't had early plans on being a CPA. I really wanted to be a musician. I really wanted to go out and be a rock star, but I don't think it was in the cards. But I still played, and I still was in bands in college, and so when I got out of, I was an accounting major, and when we started our firm in 1985, I graduated in 78. Worked for a couple larger firms, but then went on my own in 85 and we started our firm. I always had a lot of local musicians, a large local music store, a couple recording studios as clients, just locally. But then we had gone through a pretty rough recession in 1989, 1990, 91. And when we came out of it, I said to my partner, Don, I said, you know what, we really should find a niche, whether it be a niche service or a niche industry. And the one that was, closest to me and nearest and dearest to my heart was the music industry, because I at least had a handful of clients in that industry. And then sort of the end of the story is that I wound up speaking. It's a long story, how I was invited to speak at the the NAMM trade show. For those people who don't know, NAMM stands for National Association of Music Merchants. It's basically the trade show that happens twice a year, where all the music manufacturers of any musical product, guitars, amps, keyboards, pianos, trombones, saxophones, things of that nature, print music, they all show their product at this trade show. The big one is in the LA area. It's down in Anaheim. It's the biggest trade show the city of Anaheim hosts. And all the retailers that sell all the product are there, and all the musicians, a lot of them famous musicians who endorse the product, are there. So I started speaking at that trade show. That's where I met Daniel. And that was in the early 1990s. And that's when the door sort of blew open for our little small boutique firm in Connecticut to be in the music industry. And the music industry is a very broad term. So at the time, it was predominantly music retailers, some manufacturers, but along the way, you're at a trade show, you're going to meet people who own recording studios, people who are music educators, and musicians and bands. And so it all kind of grew organically out of the music retailing end. But it's still, to this day, Daniel, I think, would agree, the music retailers are the largest segment of music industry clients that we service as a CPA firm. And as a CPA firm, it's all accounting, tax, and consulting services, but specifically in that niche. And that's how we got into it.
Nice.
Even as guitar playing accountants.
I've been at NAMM several times, and they're a great group, but it is a monster of a convention. And we share a small thing. I am right down the area exit 21B on the 87, just south of Albany. So
no kidding. I know exactly where that is.
There you go. Okay. So Daniel, tell me a little about your journey from classical trombonist to visiting all 30 MLB parks. How has that personal interest intersected with your professional life?
Well, it's funny. Music has always been a big part of our family, both from starting with my dad. My dad and his brothers had a bluegrass band, so I grew up on Saturday nights going to listen to bluegrass all the time. And it just, music was all around. We played music at church. We played music in all these different venues. We had a good band program. And so when I went to college, I went thinking I was going to be a music educator. And so I went off to college, which is where I met my wife, who was in the band as well. So there's another music connection. And when I was there, I needed to make some money. I mean, my parents, kind of like Alan tells his kids all the time, go make yourself some money, kiddos. So I needed to make some money. So I went to the local store to teach music lessons. So believe it or not, I kind of got my connection between my love of music and even taking it more to a professional level by being a teacher. I was an independent contractor teacher in a music store teaching lessons. And through that time, I always have really been fascinated with finance, with Wall Street. And in fact, coming right out of college, I got hired by a company. It was a publicly owned company to be their investor relations. I was doing something like that. And I did it for about 6 months. And frankly, Bob, I just hated it. I was like, I can't do this. This is too much. Shareholders calling every day. It was like, okay, not for me. And remember, my degree is in music education. That's my degree, bachelor of arts in music education. It's been so long, I forgot. But then I quit that job and I said, all right, I'm going to go become a band director. And I went back to that music store and said, hey, can I teach lessons here until I can, the school teaching season comes. And I never left that store. And from that time, I started with that store. Then I was a road representative, traveling the road. Maybe that's how you get my love of baseball stadiums. I don't know, but I was a road rep. So I was calling, I was working the sales side of it. Then they had some challenges in the accounting department. That's what got me to the accounting side. And that's how I met Alan. And so it all kind of merged together where music, I think for most of us in our firm, music is kind of like that core thing that we all have in common. But how we kind of got here and to be in this firm, FKCO, you don't have to be a musician to be in our firm, but probably Alan, 80% we only have 12 people in our office, but most of them have a music relation background. So that was good. And then my relation to tie that to the ballparks, or my boys I have two boys, 18 and 21, love baseball. We love baseball. And so we decided when we moved to Connecticut about 12 years ago, If you just kind of look at the roadmap between Missouri, which is where I live now and where I started from, to Connecticut, there's about 15 ballparks between Missouri and Connecticut. One summer we did a road trip and literally saw like 12 or 15 ball games in one summer. And then we realized, well, heck, we're halfway there. We got to see all 30. So we did see all 30 together as a family. It was a really fun, special time. So.
And what's your favorite team? Don't say Boston. Don't say Boston.
No, St. Louis Cardinals.
Cardinals. Like Cardinals. I'm a Yankees guy.
Yeah.
I can't believe
Bob, it's funny, Bob. I've worked side by side with Daniel for almost 20 years. You think you know somebody, and I never knew his dad was in a bluegrass band. Never knew that.
See the things you find out on this podcast. Stay tuned, folks. More revelations.
Exactly. Which begs the question why Daniel doesn't play the banjo. I don't understand that either. So
I always wanted to play the mandolin. That was the one that fascinated me. The mandolin was the cool one. And the other one was, remember, I'm still only 5'8", but I think when I graduated from high school, I was like 4'11" or something like that. I always wanted to play, and still to this day, the upright bass.
And you had a VW to put it in, right? I mean, that's always the case. The shortest guy, the smallest car wants to do the string bass.
Yeah, exactly. But I wanted to do the string bass, but I've never learned that. If Alan, if you would pay for me to take bass guitar lessons, I would be on it in a heartbeat, and then I can be your bassist.
No problem. Okay, I'm all for that. Yeah, everybody asks. I have a ton of guitars, way too many than I'd like to admit, and many more than I ever admit to my wife. And people always say like what's your most expensive guitar that you own? And you know what the funny answer is? It's not a guitar; it's a mandolin. I have a 1919 The Gibson. It's a F4. And that's my most expensive non-guitar.
That's funny.
Or a guitar that's not a guitar; it's a mandolin. I don't know.
John Denver, when he said he had an Gibson F4 jazz guitar that is in his prized possession. Anyway, and you and I, Daniel, share the distinction of getting our degree in Bachelor of Arts for music ed. And I walked into high school at Irvine High School, and there's 30 teenage boys trying to play Stairway to Heaven on untuned guitars. Like, there's not enough gin in this planet. I'm out. And it's like, she's like, Bob, you got to get the certification because you got to finish the degree. I was like, great, but I am not doing this job. So
that's what I did.
We have talked around music a lot, but have the rules about buying merchandise, and again, not only just music people listening to us, but we're listening around the world. So have the rules about buying merchandise changed since the pandemic? Who wants to take that?
I'll jump in first with that one because it's crazy. What was like when I first ran into Alan, and probably Alan was like 1999 or 2000 at the NAMM show. He probably then used that presentation on the buying rules and managing your inventory literally till 2019. I mean, it probably ran for 20 years. And what we've seen, Bob, is what's crazy is that it's actually the cycle of doing the cycle of instruments and of buying inventory has changed dramatically, and it's changing frequently. Even like the last quarter, I was just talking to somebody in this last quarter, and it seems like things are changing again. Alan and I were talking about inventory supply chain this morning and how it just is so unpredictable. So I think the buying rules are similar, but the main changing variable that we've seen and that we keep seeing is nothing more than what's going on with the supplier side and this kind of that supply pipeline. That's really what's changed. Don't you agree, Alan? Something like that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Daniel and I always believed, as most inventory management professionals would tell you, that you want to keep your inventory levels, lean and mean. You want to have obviously enough product in stock where you're not going to miss sales and you're going to make a decent profit. While at the same time, you don't want to have too much inventory in stock that's going to tie up, valuable working capital or possibly limited working capital and cash and borrowing ability. So it's a balancing act. And so, the answer is to understand it and analyze it and be able to keep these levels of inventory sufficient, not too much, it's like the porridge and the Three Bears, not too hot, not too cold, just right.
What do I do with that?
Well, Daniel and I have had a lot of discussion about that very topic. At the end of every accounting engagement that we do when we generate their financial statements and tax returns for all of our music retailing clients. Daniel's really good about always sitting down with the music store owners and walking through the financials and teaching them how to read them, how to understand what they say, how to have some insight as to what those financials are telling us, whether it be, looking at inventory turns or looking at margins or looking at what we call GMROI, gross margin return on investment. And so, we're all about educating all of our clients. And so, keeping inventory levels mean and lean was great until the pandemic happened. And then you couldn't get product. And really those clients that were over inventoried actually did pretty good because they had product that others didn't have. And so that basically threw out, decades of advice out the window during a pandemic. But with that being said, just like Daniel said, there's an unpredictability about, product when it's going to come in. You can order something that you think is scheduled for, 6 to 12 months out. All of a sudden it shows up because the manufacturer got caught up on all their manufacturing of product sooner, because a lot of the retailers were doing things like ordering from when they could. They were, basically, ordering from multiple suppliers where they could. Some product you can't. So it's like, as Daniel always says, it was a pendulum. And the funny thing about pendulums, when they swing one way at the beginning of a pandemic, chances are they're going to swing back equally the other way. And that's exactly what happened. We saw many of our retailers with way too much inventory in the last year or so, because all of a sudden those orders got fulfilled, and then things that they hadn't counted on all of a sudden came in greater amounts, and it came in at inopportune time. So my last comment, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel because I know he'll have something to say about this. What I've concluded in my mind going forward is that, you have to keep inventory levels lean and mean. It's probably to your advantage if you're going to swing one way or the other to probably keep more on hand than less on hand in the event another pesky virus shows up. But the only retailers who can do that are ones that are financially well run. They're fiscally responsible, where they can have extra monies and financial resources tied up in arguably an overage of inventory. Those who are struggling can't do that.
Yeah, and let me just throw in on that, Bob, is that if there are a series of words that I use on a regular basis, is when people are calling me with these same questions that you're pushing us on, and here's the answer I give them: have a plan. It's amazing how many people don't have a plan, because everybody right now are not, for the most part, they're making assumptions that either the supply chain is going to be a problem again, while at the same time they're also making an assumption that sales are going to continue at the level they did during the pandemic. And I think as we're now, I don't know if we're ever going to be completely over the pandemic, but let's say we're a year and a half arguably removed past the worst parts of the pandemic. I think we've seen that supply chain is definitely no longer a problem, because now all the manufacturers are sitting on a glut of product they're trying to shove at the retailers. But also the sales are declining. When you look at some of the numbers in the industry, the sales are on the decline. So resting on those two assumptions, that supply chain is going to be a problem, so I better order more, and I also need to order more because sales are going to continue, I think that's a rough place to be. And that's why I tell people, well, if you're going to order a bunch of stuff, you better have a plan. You need to have a plan for this. You need to have a plan for that. What is your plan if you're going to order all of that inventory?
Yeah, and I think, a couple things pop out that I think the supply chain, I think it has fixed. I think we are settling into 2018, 2019 in a lot of ways. I think music retailers, I think a lot of disposable purchases, whether it's home electronics or furniture, we stole demand from the future is what we did.
Yep.
And then had a once in a lifetime boom. And everybody's like, oh, it's the new normal. And so you'd hire anyone you could. This is my chance to share a little bit. You hire anyone you could. And if you had it in stock, they were an amazing salesperson. They're the bomb. They're great. But the problem with that is they have no sales skills. And so it was really just one step from e-com. And now all these suppliers who we're also drinking the Kool-Aid like it's a new world. Everyone wants guitars and xylophones and everything else. Great. But now they're sitting on merch, and now they're going to start saying, oh, I can make you a special deal, Daniel. Take this off my hands. And I think that's the road to ruin as well, because you've been in this lack mentality. Now there's abundance. And now some guy's like, hey, we've got the answer. And I think a lot of people get tricked into hearing the sirens call on that. I mean, is there a way to navigate between that temptation? Oh, but I could get it. I mean, our margin be so great. To your point, if you don't have a plan, what the hell are you going to do with all of these? Right.
Right.
So what does a retailer do? Because that's what's going to happen. If it hasn't already started, that's what's going to happen.
And the thing, Bob, we always start those conversations off. You hate to think about the end, but what do they tell you if you start a business? The best time to prepare for your exit for a business is the day that you start your business, right? So that's what they start. So we say the same thing. If you're going to make a purchase of inventory, you need to make the purchase with the thought of when you're going to sell it in mind. And if you don't have a plan to sell it, what ends up happening is musical products, for the most part, are not an appreciating asset. Their value is not going to go up. I mean, you talk to Steinway dealers, and Steinway pianos, continue to go up in volume. And there's exceptions to every rule, as we know. So there are items that are appreciated, but generally speaking, when you're talking capos and picks and guitars and drum heads, and those are later down the road. If things don't work out, they're being sold for 50 cents on the cost dollar. And it's crazy. I had a person once. I was on site, and I was talking to them about inventory management. I was talking to them about buying, and they had a piece that they had on their wall for 2 years. And I was telling them, listen, you can't have something on your wall for 2 years. It's not good. And I'm like, so would you? And I was asked the question, would you rebuy this if you sold it today? And they said, well, probably. And I'm like, okay, well then just keep that one. But if you're not going to rebuy it, I said, you probably should sell it. Well, you fast forward a year, Bob, the guy ends up calling me. He says, I ended up selling all my inventory. I sold the whole lot of my inventory for 60 cents on the cost dollar. He goes, if I would have listened to you, and I would have sold that even for the dollar. He didn't want to discount it down to cost, but he sold his whole lot of inventory at 60 cents on the cost dollar. And it was like, listen, this is why inventory and purchasing and having a plan to what do with your inventory. And even if it doesn't go according to plan, get out of that plan sooner than later, because you're not going to get it on the backside. You're really not.
That's a great story. To me, people say, isn't it sad when you see a business go out of business? And I said, what drives me nuts is the business is full of merchandise.
Yeah.
This was not a person that understood retail. And they still had their little clear plastic somethings holding whatever the item was, however big or small, that had discolored, might have had shop worn or something else, but it was too precious. Someone will walk in. It's like, no, they won't. And if they did, they'd be on eBay anyway. So good. Well, thanks for that, Daniel. Alan, what is your rule of thumb for buying inventory? Explain this for all of us who don't understand what that means. We can't just say, I'll take it.
Yeah. So it's pretty easy. I came up with this several years ago. It's just that I worked it out mathematically, and I wanted to have something that when I speak, Daniel and I speak in front of, as you know, at NAMM, a few hundred people at a time, and I wanted to leave them with something that would just resonate with them in their head. They wouldn't have to write it down. That when they got on the show floor, that they could apply this principle, if you will, of buying, and to know. Not only to answer themselves as to whether they should buy something, but how many of an item to buy. And so I came up with this rule of thumb. The rule of thumb is, when you're looking at an item, buy that item from the manufacturer, or that quantity of item, only if you know you can sell it in X days or less, where X is equal to the gross profit percent times the number of days in a year. And then I kind of simplified it even more, and just by way of example. So let's say you're looking at an electronic keyboard that sells for $1,000, and let's say your cost is $750, including shipping. So if you look at $750 over $1,000, that's a 75% cost, or 25% gross profit margin. You're going to make $250 on a $1,000 sale. all you have to do is take that percentage, 25%, multiply it times the number of days in a year. And I always tell everybody, round it to 360. Don't worry about 365. So you can do the math easy. So 25% of 365 is 90 days. So the question is simply, if you know that you for sure can sell that keyboard, that electronic keyboard, in 90 days or less, buy it. But if you know it's going to take you longer, for sure, it's going to take you longer, don't buy it. Or don't buy it in the quantity that you're looking at. Buy it in a quantity that comes under those number of days. And I use two other examples just to sort of drive it home. You look at an acoustic piano that's selling for 20 grand, that's going to cost you 10 grand. That's $10,000 of gross profit dollars, or 50% margin. 50% times 360 days is 180 days. So I basically say, look, okay, if you know that you're going to achieve at least a 50% margin, I'll give you half a year to move it. But on the other extreme, and this is my last example, if you're looking at a package of guitar strings that sell for $10 and it's going to cost you $9, and you're going to make $1 on $10 sale, or 10%. 10% times 360 days is 36 days. If all you're going to make is 10%, you better be moving it in 36 days or less. And there's your perfect formula to look at margin percent against time. Basically, how much time do I have to sell this item given the margin that I'm going to achieve?
I call that the
because
hot
invariably,
start burning,
invariably
longer, right?
Right, and because you have these people that I always like to have people in the audience. I go, how many people can think of any product in your store you've had for at least a year? Raise their hand. How about 2 years?
And they're proud of it.
Yeah. They
One
are.
person, John Bon Jovi's coming in one day. All right.
Right.
Well, but
so I've seen people with 5 years.
If I can just, musicians are hopeful people. Retailers are hopeful people. A woman's a fashionista. She knows I've got several upscale clients here in the upstate New York and Texas and Florida. They're absolutely optimistic. Absolutely, I can sell it. But so what do I do? There I am. I've got my 20,000. I'm trying to remember all of your analyticals are so detailed. I hope it's like a Rorschach test. But so I've got my $20,000 piano. I thought I would sell in 6 months because that's what Alan told me. And it's now 8 months later. So do I start whittling it down and putting it on sale? Do I say, hell no, I paid $5 for, I've got to get $5 for this. Meanwhile, that thing takes up, let's face it, serious amount of money, a serious amount of space that
and money,
theoretically should be, right? So what would you tell them to start doing?
I think there's a pecking order. You don't have to immediately go to discounting the product, but there's a couple of things that you can do beforehand. You can re-merchandise the item, have an event. There's a variety. Have a clinic, where you're demoing that item. There's a lot of things to bring.
You can do to
spiff the salespeople.
There's $1,000 you sell this.
Yeah. It works.
And Daniel worked in retail for how many years were you in? At
almost 10 years. Yeah.
So he's lived it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we had to do. It's like, it was very much a fluid process between the purchasing of inventory and the people that were selling the inventory, because you could buy the best deal of anything because there's always people selling, the pallet specials. But if your salespeople wouldn't get behind it and sell it, the pallet just sat there in the corner and just became, just pallet dust. And so you'd have to do that. And sometimes, the purchasing people would make a bad buy and you have to spend for people to move it. It's all about the communication chain and people, getting excited about the product. But you talk about if you're going to drop $20,000 for a piano, I can tell you all of our piano dealers that do that, they're out actively, pursuing those items. And Bob, that gets a lot more difficult for what we like to call a combo store or a band and orchestra store. Both of those people, when you're talking about print music and all these accessories like picks and reeds, and there's just so many items. There could be 100,000 items in a music store that they can't keep their eye on like they could a $20,000 high-end piano. But
Hold
that's
that thought.
exactly.
We'll come back to that. Hold that thought. We'll come back to that. So before we continue, we love our loyal listeners. So if you do me a favor, give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube if you're watching the video. I'd appreciate it. And we're going to return after this word from SalesRx Online Retail Sales Training. Hey, it's Bob again. I'm not only your host, but also the founder of the SalesRx Online Retail Sales Training Program. How many sales that should have been yours walked out your front doors today? You know, with shoppers being more discerning about where and when they shop, you need to convert more lookers to buyers. And SalesRx is the perfect solution to make training memorable. It's bite-sized, it can fit easily into your schedules. Don't tell me you don't have time to train. If you can give them time to take a break, you have time for them to train. Now, the training builds from some of the quickest ways to engage shoppers to the most advanced. Everything is planned so you can implement your sales training program with a click of a button. And there's a reason we're on 4 continents training thousands, because SalesRx is scalable. Everybody learns the same new skills that will grow your sales. In fact, 83% of users report a double-digit increase in their sales within 6 months. Wouldn't you like that to be your story? Visit SalesRx to learn more and set up a call with me to see how we can help. That's SalesRx.com. Now back to the broadcast. All right, and we're back with Alan Friedman and Daniel Jobe talking about open to buy and margins and what do we do if it doesn't sell. So, Daniel, to complete that thought, it is a bit of a dance, but I think the challenge for an awful lot of retailers is you've got to have good POS to be able to ID what isn't right. So when you buy it, you can set out these markers that it will tell you, hey, something's going on. But to your point, that's a lot to manage, even with the automation you can get from within your POS. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to just say, computer, tell me what are our worst performing SKUs and give me 3 ways I can help get rid of them. And it's going to be like, boom, like that, not that far away, right? So what would you, what do you do when you've got all of these little parts and, you know, the owner's the only one that usually knows margin. Your salespeople certainly don't. They might on the big stuff, but they're not thinking about, we got to sell more strings. But to your point, you've got to build that basket no matter what you sell.
Right. I think the big thing is to close that gap with, I think a lot of salespeople, because of the point of sale systems, they do know margin on most items. But even have an items per sale goal for your sales staff, I think that's huge, because that's exactly how those add-on sales, as people are walking with a guitar. You can't just walk out with a guitar. You got to have a strap, a picks, or Alan would have to walk out with 3 guitars because one just wouldn't do it. So you'd have to get 2 more. But a trombone player would just walk out with 1 trombone and maybe a polished cloth or something. But you have to add on. I mean, that's a big thing to do. And you're exactly right that it's still tragic when people call. We get a lot of calls of people calling saying, "Hey, I'm having cash flow problems. Can you look at my, can you give me some help?" And it's like, yeah, okay, send me over a financial statement. Yeah, I don't get those from my account, but once a year. Oh, okay. Well, can you send me over like do you have a profit and loss? Anything? No. Okay. Well, okay. Well, can you send me over an inventory list? Man, I just really haven't gotten around to getting my inventory in. Well, all 3 of those answers are pretty bad answers, especially in the year 2023, because it is we're in an AI world. Alan wants to ignore that we're in an AI world, but we are in an AI world. And if you don't have those simple building blocks of things ready to go, you really don't know what's selling, what's not selling. But I would still say, probably 2 out of every 10 calls I get, they are still not. These are music retail stores in 2023 that are not running things through a point of sale system. And I just don't even have a clue how in the world they're functioning.
But see, I think that's kind of it, Daniel. And that's not necessarily just musicians. That's a lot of retailers. Oh, I don't need all this, right? Or, oh, I've got it on our servers. I'm like, when did you install this? Oh, in the 80s. And you're like, do you still have the phone from the 80s? Like, it's almost a willingness not to want. For example, I do online retail sales training program, and it's very extensive. It takes 5 or 6 months, and the end of it, we say you should order mystery shops.
Yeah,
and you'd be shocked the pushback you get. It's almost like, well, I don't really want to know that much, and that's kind of the same thing, right? Like, if I don't print it out, I don't have to worry about it. But
Right.
but to your point, by the time they call you that, can you help me? Without those markers, you don't even know where the boat is in the water, right?
Right.
Which is why it's sinking. I mean, it's not like,
Right.
oh, that's a mystery. You're doing great. We just don't know it, right? It's like,
Right.
oh, I can see exactly what happened. You're sitting on merch that's 10 years old and it's gathering dust, which is impacting your open to buy, which is a great place for one of you to explain, do I need an open to buy? What's the easiest way to figure it? And do you think I have to have it on every vendor, or is it a category, or what? Alan, you can go first.
Well,
As
I'm
long as you're
okay.
short.
As long as I'm short. Okay. Well, I want to just touch upon something you said earlier, and then I'm going to answer your question. When you talked about the piano and the space that it takes up, and you said and the money, when there's a, it's been proven over and over again by inventory management professionals that when you buy an item on January 1st for $1,000, if that item is sitting around for a year, for an entire year, that item has probably cost you about $1,300. It is about a 30% addition of cost. And what do I mean by that? Well, obviously, if it's been sitting around for a year, you've had to tune it, clean it, re-merchandise it, the rent it's taking up, if you allocated the rent, for the space of that item, the tracking of that item, the manpower to count it in a physical inventory. You add up all those costs. That's not $1,000. And God forbid you put it on floor planning or you borrowed from the bank to pay for it. Well, there's an interest cost. So $1,000 item that's been sitting around for a year is now cost you $1,300. So that's why.
Stop just for a second. That's
Yeah.
very counterintuitive, because we often think that I bought this thing, it's just going down. And what you're saying to us is, no, kids, the cost is going up. And that's very different. The price you can get for it's going down, but the
Correct.
every day it sits there is going up. It's it's a cancer in your wallet that you're not even aware of until the end, when you're getting 60% of what you paid for it.
Right. And as that market price does come down, obsolescence will do that. New products that come out, as something's out of fad, as that price comes down and as your cost goes up, your profit's getting crushed quickly. And so that's why we're always okay, you should be buying in terms of 30, 60, 90 days. That's basically the general time frame, which never happens in the music retailing industry. I mean, it does with some products. Some of the accessory product moves very, very fast. Daniel's done a whole analysis of this. When you look at the whole pie of inventory, you've probably got 2/3 of your inventory is moving really slowly. But the other 1/3, like accessories and which tend to be higher margin product, are moving so fast it's making up for the sins of the other 2/3 of your inventory. So, when you start looking at that and you start measuring it and you start looking at the opportunity, there's an opportunity cost of not having, you're taking vital cash, converting it to inventory, which is an illiquid asset, still an asset until you sell it. The idea is to convert it back to cash with some profit. And so the longer it takes to do that, you're not only running the risk of shrinking that profit because of the costs I just talked about, you're also missing opportunities for alternate use of that cash, whether it be to pay down debt, to remodel the store, whatever, those kinds of things.
Right. So, Daniel, how do I know, for example, it's time for me to add a line? Because that's the most common thing I think independents do, is we say, I'm selling this, so I'll be able to sell this. And you can make a case for it. I mean, you can make a case for anything. We should carry water heaters because they all use water, right? You're like, well, yeah, but they're not looking to us for that. But if you were in the water heater business or whatever the product is, there would be markers that would say, it's not a matter of just getting more of the same. You need to diversify. So any thoughts on that, Dan, you can add?
Yeah, I had a couple of people email me last week. I think vendors are back out now as things are adjusting and they're looking for, people to take on the lines. And the first question I always ask, I know it sounds redundant, but I asked this person last week in email, I said, okay, so how does this fit into the master plan of your branding? When you look at your branding, I'll give you an example. This one just blew my mind. This was probably about 10 years ago. You remember when ukuleles got hot? I mean, some people call them the other way they say it, but I call it ukulele.
Players, sure.
Ukulele, right?
Yeah.
Ukulele. So I literally took a call one day from a person it was a piano dealer. And they said, Daniel, I want to bounce something off you. I said, shoot, what do you got going? And they said, we're going to take on ukuleles. And they like, it's amazing. We can buy 100 ukuleles and it's less than the price of one of our pianos. It's going to be great. And I just asked them one question. I said, so the person that's coming in to buy a ukulele, are they going to make a left turn and go buy the grand piano from you? And they were like going, no, that's never going to happen.
Well, it's a new
and
customer,
I was like,
Daniel. It's a new customer will attract, right?
I know. But we always tell people you can't, you can't be everything to everybody. But I think, Bob, to answer your question, it goes back to, like the person I was speaking with last week. It was a combo shop, and it was a guitar line they were looking at carrying. I said, are you just going to shuffle sales from one to the other? Are you going to add sales? Do you have a plan where you're going to move this stuff? Are you going to track the GMRI? That's one of the things we like to track is if you track the GMRI.
That is
gross margin return on investment. And we like to look at that as your investment in your inventory because a music store's biggest asset, generally speaking, is their inventory. So you figure that by you just look at your annual profit on that inventory line. So let's say you have a line of guitars that you're selling. You say, well, what's my profit from that guitar, from that line of guitars for a year, divided by what's your average inventory to carry it. So if you look at your beginning and ending inventory, let's say you had a buy-in of 25,000 and that's what you're carrying. Well, you just look at your profit over that number and that gives you what your GMRI is. And we found that a healthy GMRI is over $1.50. Basically is a healthy GMRI to have. And when a person calls me and talks to me about taking online, the first thing I do is pull up their financials and say, well, how's your GMRI doing? Are we having inventory problems? If it's a person that has, as Alan said earlier, if you have no debt, if you've got great inventory turns, great inventory management, and you can take on the line and it would just allow you to flourish within the brand and who you've identified as your customer. It's 2 thumbs up for me, man.
Well,
it's really good.
I think I want to go back, and we are running out of time, but I think the thing that's so important for everybody is those 3 markers you said of knowing, the inventory, knowing you're buying, how much you're going to buy and be able to move through it, not wish it. Oh, I guess I was wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's a third one too. I think you can replay the podcast to get them all 3, but without those 3 markers, you should never be doing any of these things. Would you support that? That big
I totally support that. Yeah.
Now you're buying from your gut and you're saying, well, my kid likes ukuleles and her friends like ukuleles. Therefore, it makes sense. You're like, you're talking yourself into this because they had a nice booth or they whatever. I think it's rare in this day and age. And, I won't even get into the aftermarket online. Let's face it, musicians are cheap. They don't make a lot on their gigs, right? So you really have to think about, do you want to be all things to all people? Or do you want to say, I'm going to be, for schools and local talent, but also I'm going to be the premium that can also get the DJ and the other ideas. And I'm always going to be thinking about how to build that basket. That's a very different mindset than I'm going to buy this merch like I'm buying milk or I'm buying lettuce and I'm going to buy it and then it's just going to sell itself. I think you either work the system or you don't. Either you have the tools to understand what the system is and go, I'm in trouble, or you get help. So what would you think if I'm going to turn this to both of you before we get off here. So I've been listening to you for, 30, 40 minutes. I'm thinking, holy crap, these guys know a lot more than I do. And I think I might be in trouble. What should they do? Should they chuck it all? Should they, what's the baby step to, obviously they have to call you, which you can find that episode link, but how do they get their ducks in line? I'm going to start with Daniel and then Alan.
Okay, great. No, I think the easiest way to get your duck in line is, first of all, the first thing I would do is get a report and look at your oldest inventory and things that you would never buy. They were buying mistakes you made. You've just never broken up. You got to turn that to cash. We're going to stop
right there. I want you to be very specific. What do you want them to do? Do they go through and look at the inventory? Because let's face it, if I don't have all the reports, I don't have product data. So
okay, good question. Good question. We'll take it. I was assuming they had reports. I was assuming they
I'm
would
just
print a
saying, I
report.
want everybody to be in the tent with us. So
Okay, if you have a report, I'll make it this simple. We'll go to both camps. How about that, Bob? For one camp, if you have a report, run a report. If you've had it over a year, do something with it. Move it to the front, mark it down, put it online, turn that illiquid asset into cash. That would be for those that have a report. If you don't have a report, maybe your metric is looking at how much dust is on an item. Look at the dustiness of it, move the dustiness to the front, turn that into cash because it's been there for too long.
that's great. Instead of just dusting it, that's the difference.
Yeah, don't dust it, move it.
So, and again, if you've got product that you don't know what the dating is, today you could put a little sticker on the back, a color code,
Yep.
anything that shows this is what August of 2023 looked like. And then when you look at that in January, you're like, holy crap, it'll be easy. So again, it'd be great if you had a full featured POS. That's several thousands of dollars. It's a lot to get going. We're getting into the holidays. It's probably not going to happen before the end of the year, but you could. That's what I want you to all be listening today is what could I do to take action? So thanks for that, Daniel. What would you say, Alan?
Don't get into the bad position in the first place. And so it all starts with the buying. What Daniel's suggesting is absolutely accurate and what you should do had you made mistakes in the buying. And every retailer is going to make mistakes. It's a game of educated guessing. But there are a couple of principles. They're very easy to follow so you don't get yourself into that position of being over inventoried with product you can't sell. And there's 4 questions that I want every retailer to ask themselves when they're here. You go. 4 easy questions. You're looking at a product, ask yourself this: is this something my customer wants? If you get a yes, ask yourself the second question: will I make a profit? The answer is something greater than $1. Great. Get to number 3. How quickly can I sell it? 30, 60, 90 days. Awesome. Anything over, forget it. Number 4, how quickly do I have to pay for it? Because if you have to pay for it before you sell it, you have what we affectionately call negative cash flow. You follow those 4 principles of buying, you'll find the managing of inventory, which is what Daniel's talking about, a lot easier. The managing of inventory is recognizing you have a problem and knowing how to fix it. But try not to get yourself in that position in the first place by buying smarter.
All right, I'm going to challenge you both on this then. So my sales rep is awesome. Daniel trained him. And he's in here with discounts and he says, I give you dating. You'll have 120 days to sell this before the finance charges and everything else come in play. Does that impact your 4 questions we ask, Alan, or not?
Can I answer, Daniel? Daniel, I'll give you a very quick one and then let Daniel. So there was an order that I told you those 4 questions, and they were for a very good reason. If you can get through the first 3 questions with a positive answer, yes, my customers want it. Yeah, I'll make a decent profit. And yes, I can move it in 30, 60, 90 days. I'm kind of okay with you buying the product. The 4th question is still important. How quickly do I have to pay for it? Because if cash is tight or you have limited resources, you have to get the dating out of your vendors. I'm okay if you can say, yeah, okay, yes, my customers want it. Yes, I'm going to make a profit. It's going to take me 6 to 9 months to move all this. I can move it all, but it's going to take me 6 to 9 months. Great. Get 6 to 9 months out of your vendors to pay for it. That's question number 4.
I would just add that I think it's just so important that when you're putting this all together, that you are realizing that it's up to you. That, a lot of times I think people get enamored with a product. We use it. A friend has said it. We read it in a trade. Maybe that's your market. Maybe you're reading it because the trend has already come and gone. But I just want to get my only thing I would add to all that is, can we just stop wishful buying? Can we just stop wishful buying? I could have been an actor. Could have been. If you'd gone to acting school and had talent and looked like Brad Pitt. But you don't, right? So it's that same thing that, it sounds great. I could, in the best of all possible way I can. But I think on the other side, I do believe you should take educated risk using those 4 questions. And I really appreciate both of you joining us here today. The title of our podcast is Tell Me Something Good About Retail. So, Daniel, tell me something good about retail. And then Alan, before we go off.
Well, retail is still great. I think it's the conduit to give people that love music, that want an introduction to music. We're still selling, like, there's plenty of people that are selling commodities and things they need, but music is still it connects both sides of your brain, and it really gets into the creative side. So even when I was working in retail and you talk to people, they love giving those kids their first instrument, whether it's a guitar or band instrument. That's something good about retail. You're giving somebody the opportunity to make music, which I think is just totally awesome.
Excellent. Good luck with the next one, Alan. What do you say? Tell me something good about retail.
I'm going to repeat something that the president, he just left as president, former president of NAMM said, Joe Lamont. There was music before I was born, back to as earliest of recorded history. There's music throughout my lifetime, and there's probably a high likelihood there's going to be music when I'm grade A fertilizer. So knowing that there's always going to be music, and knowing that it is a very passionate, fun industry to be in. I think that being in the business of music retailing can be a lot of fun and very rewarding, and you can actually make money at it and have a great, lifestyle by virtue of it. Just follow these principles of these financial principles, these inventory buying principles, and life will get better. There's something good about retailing, especially music retailing.
That's very good. Well, I appreciate our guests, Alan Friedman and Daniel Jobe, talking to us today. And again, we're getting ready for the holidays. So remember, you got some work to do. Doesn't matter. Take one step from what you heard today and take action with it. I'm Bob Phibbs, the Retail Doc. Thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to Tell Me Something Good About Retail with Bob Phibbs, the Retail Doctor. As a listener, you can receive free information and guides when you visit retaildoc.com and sign up for our exclusive weekly newsletter. Thanks for being with us. Remember to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. To virtually bring Bob to all of your crew and associates, check out www.salesrx.com.